Good morning. What we're going to talk about today is casting using plaster of Paris. To begin with, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about safety regarding plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris is a gypsum material, and as such, the actual dry material can contain hazardous minerals. So you should be careful not to ingest it in any way. It seems self-explanatory, but it's important that we go over these things. The next thing is to really avoid getting it anywhere near eyes. In the explanation in the course, it suggests that you go around the eyes with your plaster of Paris, and that the model keeps their eyes closed while the bandage is being laid. This is to protect the eyes. If at any time the plaster of Paris drips into the eyes or gets into the eyes, I would suggest you having a clean cloth with clean water nearby. Thereby you can just wipe it and clean that plaster out of the area. And again, the model should have their eyes closed, so that should take care of a lot of those issues. The other issue with plaster is that it can, and it's rare, but it can cause burns. Yes, burns. Some people have an allergic reaction to the plaster, and that causes a chemical burn on the person. So before you use plaster of Paris on somebody's face, I highly, underline, bold, large print, highly suggest you take just a small little piece of the bandage and place it on the back of somebody's arm, preferably, or something like that, somewhere where maybe it's not super hairy, because that can be kind of painful as well. So if you place it on your model's arm, make sure that they don't have a reaction to the plaster of Paris. Let it set up, dry, take it off. I know this makes the process a little bit longer. It's not that much longer, but a little bit longer. However, in comparison to dealing with a burn, this is a minor issue to deal with. It's very rare, hardly ever happens. However, it is possible. Now, some of you may decide that instead of going and buying plaster bandage, that you have seen demonstrations on the internet showing how to do the same assignment using plaster of Paris in a bucket. Okay, you can get dry plaster of Paris, mix it by hand, and away you go. Now, while this seems like a cheap and easy method of doing things, I really highly stress that this is not advised. The reason being that in the bandage form, the plaster is fairly thin, and it's supported by the bandage, making it strong. In the form where you're going to mix a big bucket of plaster and then place it onto somebody, the major issues, well, there's two of them. One being that you can very easily create a very thick, very hard surface onto the facial structure that may end up going under a chin or into an area to create an undercut, which then becomes very difficult to take off. The second reason is that the plaster of Paris can heat up, and the thicker that it gets, the more heat it's going to put off. If it's thick and it's putting off a lot of heat, again, it can burn you. Yes, burn. It can hurt you badly. So you do not want to put thick, half-inch layers of plaster on somebody's face or body anywhere. Okay? Today I'm going to demonstrate to you how we go about casting a plaster mask. In this case, I have a concrete cast that I had made in the past of my wife's face, so I will be using that as my template. If it'd be the same process if you had a model as what I'm going to demonstrate with you using the plaster cast. One of the things you want to make sure that you have are the materials. You can see here I have a bowl of water, I have a clean cloth, I have my plaster bandages, I actually have extra sort of sitting at the side in case, which I really shouldn't need. I have Vaseline, which is very nice because it creates a nice barrier between your skin and the material that you're going to be putting on with the plaster. It's really important that you use Vaseline or something like Vaseline. Some people will use a face cream, but some barrier that's not going to quickly absorb into your skin, but is going to stay on the surface of your skin to create that barrier between yourself and the plaster. Okay, so I'm going to be fairly liberal with the petroleum jelly Vaseline and just goop it on there really nice. Make sure that you're getting everywhere. Want to make sure that anywhere where there's hair, like eyebrows, you have put an ample amount of petroleum jelly. Otherwise, it can catch. Scissors. One of the things I didn't have on my table at the very beginning when I started this was scissors. The other thing I think I should let you know is that I have a drop sheet, plastic drop sheet over top of my table and the area that I'm working on. This helps provide a little bit of protection from splash. So I'm going to take my gauze strips, I'm going to cut it into pieces. This one's going to be fairly large, but most of them I'm going to make fairly small, 1.5 inches by about 3 inches. And I'll cut quite a few of these. Okay, now I have my strips, let's say about 1.5 inches by about 3 inches width by length, and I'm going to put them into the water. You'll see that as soon as you put it into the water, it sort of softens and turns really goopy very quickly. Okay, this then you can place onto the face of the person that you're working with. Now, as I place it on, if I just rub it just a little bit, you'll see, you probably can't see it in the video, but when you're doing this, you'll be able to notice that the plaster is moving along the tissue of the bandage, and that's good. You want to get that sort of worked down so you don't have big air bubbles and things like that. It doesn't really matter too much in this case because we're creating a mask, so we're creating a positive instead of a negative. But now the next piece I'm going to put crosswise, so I want to make sure that my angles are continuing to change. I'm not using the same angle all the time. It's a fairly quick process. Another thing you might want to do is just sort of take a little bit of the excess water off. Here I took a piece of gauze and I folded it in half, so it's very narrow. It's only maybe 1/4 inch wide, same length. It's and then I'm going to put it on the bridge of the nose, bring it down right through the middle, so I still have my nostril holes, but this way it's covering that center little piece of the nostril, which in this case I want to do that. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but in this case that's what I want to do. Fold that over. That's going to be an area when you're working on these that your model's probably going to get a little bit uncomfortable, is when you're working around the eyes. The other thing to worry about, of course, is breathing and making sure that they're comfortable breathing through a small hole. You can even sort of practice beforehand, just have them lie down and breathe through a straw for a little while. Okay, that's it for this. Part 1 complete. Okay, so now we have covered our face in the plaster. We've waited a couple minutes. It doesn't really take that long. you'll be able to tell by feeling it. It'll be fairly firm. At that point, you can start working around the edges. You just sort of gently lift a little bit of the edge all the way around. You should see it start to, see right there? I don't know if you can tell, but it's just wiggling a little bit. I'm just going to kind of wiggle. I'm not going to just yank on it, just wiggle gently. Now, again, this can be a little bit uncomfortable for the model, depending on how they're feeling, but try not to rush and just go slow and wiggle and gently let it pull off. It'll kind of have a little bit of suction. So there we go. And here's my completed mask.